This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Nigeria, the CBN, which says that cash in circulation rose by 24% to 114.22 trillion naira in March of 2025, which is up from the 92.19 trillion naira recorded in March of 2024. The CBN has attributed this surge in money supply to inflationary pressures. They cited a climb in headline inflation, which was recorded at 24.23% in March. Joining us this morning to speak on the implications for the economy is Adegboyega Adebajo, who is an economist. Mr. Adebajo, good morning. Thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Good morning.
I wonder if we can start with your reactions to the figures that the CBN has put out.
Yeah. Well, it just shows that CBN has quite a battle on its hands. A few weeks ago, we did have open market operations, which was essentially to try to reduce the amount of liquidity in the system. But that hasn't seemed to have had the impact required. And when you look at it, maybe to give some clarity, let's do a little bit of definition. M3, which is what everybody seems to be talking about, is a broad money supply, and that measures practically all physical currency, demand deposits, savings, time deposits, any other liquid asset. But there are two other measures. There's a narrow money supply, which tends to be M1, which is just physical currency in circulation and demand deposits. And then M2, which is M1 plus savings deposits, money market securities. And so M3, which is the broadest measure, takes all into consideration. And a few of my colleagues are starting to say, well, there seems to be some kind of correlation or positive relationship between the way the money supply is increasing and the fact that inflation is increasing too. So it just gives a need for further thought and examination, actually, of what really is causing all this.
You were talking about the need to go back to the drawing table, right, to rethink things. And my question is, who's doing more of the rethinking? Because the CBN has tried quite a bit of things. The orthodox approach on the monetary side, but on the monetary side. Now, the trouble is, when they were taking those steps, they had said that the fiscal side needs to pull its weight as well, which would then lie with the executive, whether at the federal level, but also including the subnational level. Do you think that side has done enough to try to rein this back in?
Well, that's a pretty interesting perspective you brought in, Nabila. And the key thing here is, if you're looking at the economy, the macroeconomy as a whole, then the subnationals also need to tag along with the central bank. There's no doubt about it. The CBN's done a lot. It's kept the MPR at the rate it has. It's asked banks to have a cash reserve ratio of 50%, try to reduce the amount of liquidity in the system. But despite all this, we still see some kind of growth. Now, two things have been said. One, the fact is the key elements of inflation, energy and food prices, seem to have risen some more in February. And I hope by April, the slight reduction in petrol prices, pump prices of petrol will reflect. But February, March, we had those increases. And maybe the demand to be able to have more cash or more money to buy these things at higher prices has, so to say, gone against the headwinds of CBN's policies. And we've seen that in how money supply has more or less increased. Now, one thing is clear. What happens with M3 and the macroeconomy? It could be a good thing and it could be a bad thing, because a growing money supply is also an indication of economic expansion. just as much as it may signal the fact that if it grows too much, it leads to inflation. And so the big question is, by how much do you want it to grow? And that, I feel, is why the CBN tends to go out into the market and carry out those open market operations with the bank to reduce the amount of money available in the bank, so that there is a constraint on lending and a constraint on cash available, so to say.
So, there's real questions on just how typically we say that in Nigeria economic principles don't work. This CBN administration came back and said that a return to orthodoxy will help us restabilize the markets and the macroeconomics. The trouble now is, while we're seeing this increase in money in circulation, the most recent inflation report also told us that inflation rose. The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria have just put out a statement to say that they've got a massive amount of unsold goods that's hitting trillions of naira. So there's just this indication that despite what we've been doing over the last year plus, it's simply not working. We're expecting the MPC meeting to hold. This is a few weeks from now. I believe it's on the 25th of May or so. So we're roughly 3-4 weeks away from there. Considering all these factors, how do you see the MPC kind of weighing in on interest rates at a time where we keep seeing that investors are coming into the economy?
Well, so for one thing, I expect the MPC to retain the tight hold on monetary supply. So I do not see the MPR rate coming down. I expect it to at least be maintained. It's tough to suggest an increase there, but it needs to be tight, as it were, because there's something about money supply being available. One, what you find is that consumer spending can actually lead to inflation in itself, and that's where you have demand pull. Once the money is available over there, there's that much of a pull, and there's a need to rein in these prices at this time. There's an interesting factor in all this, and that's simply that even the aggregate inflow of foreign exchange actually fell in March, and that's an indication of perhaps more with what's happening globally than with what's happening in Nigeria. So one expects that to stabilize. There was also the fact that oil prices dropped for a while, so that those things are actually positive in their own ways in terms of the influence they're having on the immediate indices we're looking at. But Nabila, we cannot expect some of these measures to work overnight. At most, we hope to see the long-term effects, and long-term, maybe a quarter, maybe half year, then we will start to see the effects. I'm worried, though, and I was thinking about whether this was something worth saying whilst we're talking about this, because it will seem like an unserious suggestion, but it is serious that as much as 1.1 trillion naira went into a Ponzi scheme, whilst the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria has up to 2 trillion naira in unsold goods. So what we're looking at is those whose money are kept back in the bank require some form of investment to see that their money isn't idle and it's working for them. Now, yes, this increases the amount of money in the economy when you look at the broad money supply, but at least with the CBN's cash reserve ratio, it keeps it out of immediate circulation, M1, which is the narrow money supply. And I think that may be what the CBN is going to look at a bit. Rein in the narrow money supply. That means a lot of us may have to rely more on digital payments rather than cash. And I still think there's a bit too much cash going around. We need to digitalize more payments. And perhaps the central bank needs to encourage that by reducing the percentages and the charges on digital payments. and you'll find a flow going in there. That makes for proper data accountability, and it also makes it possible to actually control that supply of money and how it goes.
Very well. Mr. Adebajo, thank you very much for your time and expertise on this conversation. Adegboyega Adebajo is an economist who joined us to speak on the Central Bank of Nigeria's statement that cash in circulation rose by 24% to 114.22 trillion naira in March of 2025. It's up by 24% from last year. You're still on Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. The conversation continues shortly.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.